Yeah, thank you. Like I said, I'm Oliver Ford. I'm the vice chair of the certification committee. I've been tasked with helping out on the organization of the TASTE test this year. Lucky for y'all, we have two taste experts on the call to walk us through. The agenda today is the general taste overview. Oh, I skipped their names. Bill Stevenson and Andy Fitzgerald. They've been very instrumental in planning and executing the taste test for years and years. So, what they are going to review is the general overview, how the cheese part of the test works, how the single attribute part of the test works, test prep tips for the cheeses and single attributes, and then there will be time for questions at the end. So, Bill, Andy, hand it over to you.
Thanks, Ollie. It's a pleasure to be speaking with y'all and going over this. I know this will look a lot like a informational that's on the website and in a recorded form from a couple of years ago, but we thought it would be good to go over this stuff in person, especially if there's any particular questions you might have. And also, it gives us an opportunity to improve our information that we transmit out to you so that we can do a better job by you of helping you prepare and to offer some updates on additional improvements that we're making to help you prepare for the exam as well. So this is a quick kind of an overview slide of what you can expect on test day. If this is all already familiar to you, then hopefully it makes sense. But if it's not familiar, basically the idea for the taste test is in terms of your responsibility, you're going to be evaluating 12 cheeses on test day, and we'll talk about what that looks like. You're going to be evaluating 10 what we call single attribute samples on test day, and we'll get into what that looks like. And you have 3 hours to do it. Just noting here on this slide that at the same time that you're doing that, over those 3 hours, we'll have a panel of 10 experts. We call them the norming team. They will be doing the same exact thing at the same exact time. And that is in order for us to establish a baseline of what the cheeses are on that day at that time. Because as you know, cheese is very much a living entity and it can change between lots over time. And so we want to make sure that what you are evaluating is being evaluated at the same time by our experts so that we can kind of give a really solid baseline for your evaluation. So that's what's happening on test day. So let's get into a little bit more of what's happening with the cheeses in particular. Andy?
Hey, all. So we're going to go through just kind of how it's going to roll out on the day of. So at the start of the test, there will already be 3 cheeses out, and then we put them out in 30-minute increments. Part of that is in order for the cheeses to stay in the appropriate temperature. So we temper these cheeses based by the type of cheese. So we have them coming out and being held out of refrigeration prior to coming out for you to evaluate them. So that way, they're warmed up at room temperature and easier to evaluate. They come through, as it says, in increasing flavor and aroma. So we're not going to start you off with a wash rind blue cheese as the first one and then expect you to review creme fraiche at the end. With that, in each flight, as they come out in threes, it's your choice as to what order you want to do them in. Like as everybody's coming up to get their cheese, there will be times where there's maybe a little bit of a traffic jam. So maybe you want to kind of grab, like you could grab all 3 at once, or you can come back up and get like cheese 2 as your first cheese. So it's up to you, but they're going to come out in these 30-minute staggered increments. Next slide.
How are they going to be identified or labeled for you? You won't know the brand, You won't know the maker. We're not going to have any of those identifying marks on the cheeses, but we will put on the cheeses or like on a placard in front of the cheeses, the judging and competition category and subcategory identifiers to give you an idea of what it is that you're looking at. So these are examples of what those categories say about the cheese. So you'll have this level of detail in front of you so that you can kind of get that starting sense of what it is that you're looking at. Just a note that the cheeses don't have to be from the US. So, there could be cheeses that are, and there will be cheeses that are from US producers for sure, but they could also be international as well. So it's very much reflecting cheeses in the supply chain overall. And still, we're going to fit them into the various categories. So that's a fairly straightforward process for us to do. The judging and competition categories, they cover a whole range of different cheeses. So whether they're made in the US or internationally, we're able to apply, the categorization, the subcategorization to a particular cheese. Andy, you'd made a point here about from personal experience about, seeing a cheese out on the table and having an idea of what it is and how that can be, you'd think that could be a benefit, but actually it could also be a detriment. Do you want to kind of explain that?
Yeah, definitely. So, while we obviously put the cheeses out with them to be as ambiguous as possible as far as like what specific cheese it is, there are some cheeses out there that are pretty recognizable, based on their format, how their appearance. And so what I want you to do when you see that cheese, take that you might know what the cheese is, put that in a box and put it to the side, because you don't want that to influence any like knowledge of the cheese and expectations around how it might taste, and then have that basically kind of interrupt your thought process around, you are just evaluating the cheese. The cheese is just the cheese. And so you're going in and you're looking at the visual attributes, and then you're going to do your taste, your aroma, and your texture. And you don't want to be bogged down by whether or not it's a good piece of Mount Tam or whatever cheese it is. Like, don't even think about what the cheese is. You are purely identifying these attributes and evaluating.
Yeah. And especially, to the point, like, you might think you know what it is because you might think you've recognized the cheese for a brand that you're familiar with, but you could be wrong. There are oftentimes, a similar analog out there. And so if you've set your expectations that you're tasting a cheese and you begin to record your observations around what you think you're tasting, you might not be tasting that cheese. So I think that's a really good point. Just if you think you recognize what you're tasting, that's great. Set that to the side and just evaluate the cheese as it is in front of you. All right, Andy, you want to kind of walk through how the evaluation goes?
Sure, yeah. So what's going to happen is, like, everyone gets 12 plates for their cheeses. We're going to provide you with utensils if necessary. So you'll have forks, knives, spoons for, say, some of the softer cheeses. And you'll go up with your plate and you'll get your cheese. And then you can take it back to your table and then grab your evaluation sheet and go look at the one that you're going to evaluate for the visual attributes, which is going to pop up on the screen. But what you want to do is, essentially, you're evaluating the same cheese twice. And so you get your piece that you take back to your table, and that's the one that you're going to evaluate for texture, taste, aroma, and flavor. And then everyone is evaluating the exact same piece of cheese that's going to be on a display table, and that's going to be for appearance. And that's so that there's uniformity for everyone seeing the exact same thing. So, like, for example, if we had like an Emmentaler style cheese, you're going to have a lot of eye variation by every single piece that goes out. So that's part of why it's important that everyone gets to evaluate the same one. And then within that, It's also very important to consider that the piece of cheese that you are doing the visual appearance evaluation on, that's the only one that you are wanting to evaluate for that visual appearance. So when you go back to your table with your piece of blue cheese or whatever, you are not wanting to take into account whether or not it has deep veining in that piece, but there wasn't deep veining in the one that you evaluated for the appearance. So that's part of it's important for you to keep the two separate. And it's something that's definitely come up in years past where people have asked that question. And it's just like visual appearance is only the piece that is out on the table. Back to you, Bill.
So we've kind of been talking around this, but I'm just going to address it directly. We're not judging cheese in this test. This is not taking a cheese and evaluating it against a standard of identity and in some way rating it up or down. You know, pictured here on the screen is a wheel of Comté. And so we're not, evaluating that cheese and saying, this is not a good example of X, right? The goal of what you're doing in the taste test is simply to describe or characterize the cheese that's in front of you using the attributes that are going to be provided on the cheese attribute list for appearance, for aroma and flavor, for taste, and for texture. So you'll have the list of attributes, and you're just describing what you see, smell, taste, feel, and then giving an indication of whether it's slight, definite, or pronounced for each one of those attributes that you identify is present. And that's the exact same thing that those 10 experts are going to be doing. So they have the exact same instructions that you do. And where are you going to be doing it? Yeah, it's right here.
Yep. So this is an example of what one of the evaluation sheets, formerly called scoring sheets, but we obviously want to break away from using that term, what one of the evaluation sheets looks like. And so you're going to have 12 of these for 12 different cheeses. There could or could not be two from the same category potentially. So keep that in mind that you're going to need to keep track of your sheets. You're going to put your name on each sheet, and you're going to put the ID of the specific cheese on the sheet as well. You'll see that based on what category it is, there's going to be different number of attributes you could go through, but you're going to go through with your sheet and you're going to mark them, slight, definite, pronounced based on whether or not you find an attribute. This then is going to go on to a Scantron, which we'll get into. I encourage writing it down on this sheet because at the end of the test, you're going to turn in all your paperwork. So that's both your evaluation sheets and your Scantrons. It's all going to go into an envelope. And it's good for us to have that because those of us who are familiar with Scantrons, there can sometimes be anomalies on it where there be a smudge or something. And so then having your answers also marked on this, we can go back and double check it to make sure that it was correct.
Perfect. And then I'll take the Scantron forms that Andy mentioned. So we do use Scantron forms, just like in the CCP exam, if you're familiar with the CCP exam, in order to, it's both to facilitate the scoring, to make it a little more efficient, but also it helps for us to kind of avoid any human-related transcription errors that might take place if we were just going through your forms and then just hand keying your responses. So we use Scantron forms. So it's going to be incumbent on you to do a good job to faithfully transcribe what you've done here onto the Scantron form. And so here's kind of an example of that, right? So if this is your attribute sheet on the left and you've marked, definite for modeled, which has got attribute number 4 there in a column next to the left of the word modeled, then you're going to use the Scantron form, just letters A, B, or C. We're not doing anything with D or E, just A, B, or C for slight, definite, or pronounced. You're going to find 4 to indicate attribute number 4 on the sheet, and then you're going to fill in B for definite. So attribute number 4 is modeled. You marked definite on your sheet, and so you're going to circle in letter B on the Scantron form. And so that's how that's going to work. And you're just going to kind of roll down your attribute and then just kind of continue to fill in for 11A, 14A, 17A. That's the responses that were given on this example. And so that's what goes into the Scantron. And that's it for the cheese evaluations. Andy, you want to kind of explain how the single attributes work?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we're doing 12 cheeses, but at the same time, we're also doing our 10 single attributes, which are containers of milk with a single attribute introduced into it. When you are at your table, all of those attributes will already be at your spots. So you will be able to start with them immediately, or you can do them as you work through the cheeses, or you could do them at the end. I've definitely seen people revisit them just because, I mean, it's a lot. You don't want to be overwhelmed. And so, like, sometimes you want to go back and maybe you want to check things. But so it's going to be 10, and they're going to be labeled A through J. And then you're going to have a Scantron that also has A through J as your potential bubbles to fill in. And yes, you can smell them and you could taste them. We've made some updates to be able to pick it up a little bit better, like if it's on the palate. So we've made some updates to having these single attributes be able to be consumable. But you would go through, like, let's say milk sample A, you pick it up as yeasty, which would be number 30. And then you would go to your Scantron and you would go all the way down to number 30. And then you would fill in the bubble for A. And so really important. I'm going to drill on this a lot on the Scantron stuff because I'm a child of the 80s and I spent a lot of time on Scantrons. Make sure that you only have one bubble filled out per line. Be careful around your smudges, etc., because these machines can pick up those anomalies. So I encourage you to, when you are done with your single attributes, make sure that you filled out 10, not 11, not 9, not 12. Make sure you filled out only 10, and make sure that you have your bubbles correctly filled in, as well as only one answer per line.
That's it for the single attributes. And then I'm going to reiterate what Andy was just saying, and with kind of the big overview on Scantrons, right? So there's going to be 13 of them total. You're not filling out 100 responses per Scantron. You've got 12 Scantrons for 12 cheeses. And, maybe for a given cheese, you only identified 6 attributes for that cheese across the appearance, the aroma, etc. And so for that one Scantron, you're only going to have 6 bubbles filled out. If you identified 25 attributes for another cheese, you'd have 25 bubbles filled out for that Scantron. But in total, you're going to have 12 Scantrons for the 12 cheeses. And then you're just going to have one Scantron for all of the single attributes. So all 10 responses go on to that one Scantron for the single attributes. And it's an unusual looking Scantron. You can see there it's labeled A through J for each number. And that's because, those samples are going to be labeled A through J. So as we showed on the previous slide, you're going to find you're going to identify what you believe is present in the single attribute, look at the number that it corresponds to on the form, and then fill in the letter that corresponds to the sample on the Scantron, so that at the end, you've got 10 bubbles filled out on that one Scantron. So what we really, really want you to do is to make sure when you go to hand in your forms that you got your name on all 13 Scantrons, and that in particular for the cheeses, that you've made sure to identify the corresponding cheese reference number on all 12 cheese Scantrons. You don't want to be handing in a Scantron that you used to indicate all your evaluations for a ricotta when it was actually corresponding to the blue cheese, right? So make sure that your cheese references are on your cheese Scantrons. We'll switch over now to taste test prep tips, how to prepare for this thing. You want
So
to? Yeah.
both, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, both Bill and I have taken the test, and it's definitely beneficial to have a study buddy or study buddies in order to be able to, kind of evaluate your answers with and make sure that you're aligned on, are you getting the same thing? Like, did you get lemon? I got lemon. And so that's part of what's important with working with other people. You get to discuss and compare. You can even talk about like why, or even like things like with doing the single attributes, we're going to give them to you in little souffle cups, and you shake them a little bit, agitate it a little bit, help kind of frisk up the aroma so it's easier to smell. So working together in order to find opportunities to do better within your studying. We had somebody ask, I know, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, someone was asking if there was going to be some study groups. And so we're going to be looking at ways to help connect people and share for study groups as well for this.
Right. And I'll just add to that you will hear people say, and it's true, we all bring our own kind of subjective palates to what we taste. And so it might feel or seem as though there is no overcoming that subjectivity, but this method is how you do it. You need to have other people to help you learn in order to overcome that subjective bias. That's how you're going to learn, is you're going to kind of, there's a lot that you can taste that is similar to what other people can taste, both the flavor and the thresholds, but we all have our kind of outliers. And so by working with other people, you're going to be able to kind of push those outliers out and kind of hone your palate around a more objective standard. For the cheeses, the way this is going to work, or the way that we recommend that you prepare, you and your study buddy, taste cheese. Just, do a lot of work tasting cheese. Get into a consistent rhythm where you're tasting regularly. And the way that we specifically recommend that you do it is kind of in line with what you're going to see on test day, where you're going to see those judging and competition subcategories. So you can go to the ACS website where you can find under the judging and competition their cheese entry categories. They've got their categories and standards of excellence, and you can just sort of look up what would this cheese be. And in this example, we're calling this a washed rind cheese. And then go to the American Cheese Society's website, go to the certification page, go to the taste test or the CCS exam page, where you can find the cheese category attribute lists and pick the appropriate cheese attribute sheet for the category of cheese you're tasting and download that in order to kind of have the right attributes to taste the right kind of cheese. This is what you're going to be doing on test day, so this is how we recommend you prepare. Just reminding you here again that American and international cheeses both are fair game. So you're welcome to go and find any kind of cheeses that you find in the store. It doesn't have to be from one part of the world in order to help you practice. If you're confused about this idea of, how do I put an international cheese into an American Cheese Society category, I think you'll get the hang of it pretty quickly. Like I said, the categories lend themselves to just being able to slot stuff in. There's a very broad category for American-made international style, because of course we here in the US produce a lot of cheeses that are in an international style. So you would just take whatever cheese that is, find the right kind of description within the subcategory that will lead you to the correct attribute sheet on the taste test. And then for single attributes, Andy?
Yes. Yeah. So for single attributes, like I said, each one is going to be it's whole milk with a suit introduced into it in order to spike it or cause it to have flavor of what's been introduced into. In the example, pineapple. So you would want to maybe put some pineapple juice and shake it up, and then you would label it. And ideally, you would have a study buddy who putting these out for you so that you can evaluate them without knowing exactly what's in it. So sometimes, we'd recommend blindfolding just because, it'll potentially color the milk, or, there might be some sediment in it. So when I studied, we all blindfolded ourselves just to make doubly sure that you weren't able to like unintentionally cheat. But you will want to, you can smell, and like we said, you can taste too. And then you're going to mark it down based on that one specific single attribute. None of these are going to have two, and there won't be any that aren't a part of the actual potential answers, the attributes that we have. So we're not going to like throw something out there that you're going to have to like write in.
Yeah, that is a really good point, and it's a
And I will say,
question. Go ahead, Andy.
yeah. Oh, I was going to say also, like, I know that if you don't have a study buddy, like, I mean, husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, roommate, friend that you can buy a beer later to be like, hey, will you put out ambiguous glasses of milk for me so I can smell them and taste them and make my answers? Because you definitely want to be honing the skill around not knowing what it is, and just put down your first answer that you get off of it, and then maybe cycle back on it too.
So actually, two really good points you made that I want to follow up on. The first is when you're preparing, when you're studying for this portion of the test, you really want to be sure to kind of do this first part that we recommend on the left. Download the single attributes list and use that as kind of the reference guide when you're trying to pick out what is in the sample that somebody's prepared for you. So during the test, you'll have that attribute list in front of you in order to be able to kind of look through and pick what you think you're smelling or tasting for the single attribute. So you're not required during the test to just think of whatever it is that you're smelling or tasting with no reference at all. So you shouldn't prepare in that way. You should use the list that's made available on the ACS website to help kind of study, because that's how it's going to work on the test. It would be a much more challenging task to try and identify something with no references at all. That's not how you're going to see this section of the test during the test, and so that's not how you should prepare. Use that list. It's a discrete list of attributes, and so that should be a nice leg up during preparation, and it is what you'll see on the test. And to that point, what's on the website right now is slated to be updated by the end of this week. It's 85% the same, but there were a few tweaks that have been made, so that will be updated. So don't forget to go, if you've already downloaded it once, go back and revisit it and download it again, the updated version, which will be updated by the end of this week. The other point that Andy made that I want to follow up on is with regard to, the fact that these will be prepared for you in milk as a base, these single attributes. It doesn't mean if you're really challenged by having to prepare samples in a milk base, you could, and I did personally, also just have stuff that was a reference aroma, not in milk, just as a part of my practice to prepare for this section of the test. So somebody else had prepared a bunch of little sample cups that just had scents in them. It might have just been an herb blend or something like that. And so, it's not identical to the exercise when it comes to the test, but it's good practice. And so by all means, if you find it difficult to prepare a certain kind of an aroma in milk, you can always, for practice, just avoid the milk thing altogether. if you're confused about the meaning of an attribute, what we recommend is that you go to the ACS website, go to the certification menu, go to the CCSE exam page or the taste test page, where you'll find a link to the ACS lexicon and glossary. And within the lexicon and glossary, you'll find a definition for most of the terms that are on the taste test. The two things were developed independently. The lexicon and glossary was developed prior to the launch of the taste test, but they dovetail perfectly. And the taste test uses attributes largely that are in the lexicon and glossary. And in fact, in the same way that the single attribute update is taking place here shortly on the website, a whole bunch of new updates have been made to the lexicon and glossary in order to ensure that we have good definitions for most, if not all, of the attributes that you'll find on the taste test cheese attributes or single attribute lists. So make sure to use that as a kind of a helpful reference when you're looking at these attributes and wondering what they mean exactly.
I have two things to add on what you were saying, Bill. So for the single attributes, also, when we prepare these solutions on test day, they are meant to be like they're done deliberately. Like we're not like having them be like faintly nuanced and like you better be able to figure it out. Like these are definitely made intentionally to smell like what it's supposed to be at the test when we're preparing them. Like a bunch of us all sit around prior and make sure that we're clear. You can pick up what that aroma. Bill is talking about how we've been making some updates to the test. This is not to make the test harder, nor is it to make the test easier. It's more that we're trying to do a better job as administrators to provide you with the information to better the chances of you passing the test.
Yeah, really well said.
That's all I wanted to say.
Very well said. So here's what we have covered today. This is kind of just driving it all home. And so on test day, you're going to evaluate 12 cheeses and 10 single attribute samples in 3 hours. You record your evaluations on the Scantron forms provided and make sure that your name is on all 13 Scantron forms and that the cheese forms include the corresponding cheese that was evaluated. For the taste test prep tips, we really encourage you to study with a buddy if you can. Sometimes that's really hard geographically, but we should all be pretty used to how Zoom and Teams works these days. So you can even do it online. When I ran study groups for a couple of years for this test, not doing one this year, but it was an online forum. So everybody, wherever you were, we had the same piece of cheese and we kind of just did this process of using the forms provided on the ACS website to practice evaluating the cheeses and to practice identifying single attributes. And go ahead and use the ACS lexicon and glossary to help you prepare to understand what those words mean.
And within those cheeses that you're going to be studying, on test day, we're not going to have like a bunch of intentionally flawed cheeses as your cheeses. Like these are cheeses, they're cheeses that are pulled from supply chains. So we are going to have cheeses that are going to be the same cheese that could be found in any grocery store. So it's not like we're putting out something special in order to make the test either easier or harder. Because the whole point is supposed to be exactly home.
Exactly.
Bill, on this final slide, I've said it for a long time that this is the fun test. I really do believe that. Oliver and I took it back in 2018 together and studied for it together. And I had so much fun preparing for this test because it's the application of what we do, right? Like, I mean, like we all like to geek out on cheese a little bit. And so this is getting to take that geekery and apply it. Like, you know, like we like to sit here and enjoy and evaluate our cheeses and this is the opportunity to take that enjoyment and turn it into like an official application in assessing cheeses and aromas in milk. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us if like as you're studying, you can submit the questions over to the team, and one of us will definitely answer it as quickly as we possibly can. Because again, we want as many people to pass as can. And so we want to be able to provide you with information in order to maximize the chances
Yeah.
that you pass the test.
I see a question that popped up. Should I read it to you?
Yeah.
So on the attributes form, it is possible we only mark only a few of them as noticeable.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, the of the attribute sheets, uh, the one that has the most potential attributes is the Emmentaler, and you know, like let's just arbitrarily say it has a total of 70 potential attributes, and you might only mark down 15. Then that's the case. It could be the same thing with a fresh cheese where it doesn't exhibit a lot of the attributes that are on the sheet. So just mark down what you got. I mean, if you put down 5 answers, that might be all that the norming team sees. Like, don't think that you shouldn't be digging to
Follow
like
up.
be like, man, my Scantron looks a little empty.
Okay. Next question. Is there points off if I mark an attribute that the experts do not judge as present or vice versa?
That's a good question. So the way that the scoring works is you get points for matching the experts, but you're also able to get partial credit for being close. So let's say, for instance, you matched what they matched as far as, or what they indicated as far as an attribute goes, but you missed the intensity, slight instead of pronounced, for instance. So you can get partial credit for that. But it's not a deduction if you don't get it right. But yeah, so you're just trying to match them in a discrete sense. The way that the scoring works, though, is that you know you can't sort of just put down as many attributes. You can't overwhelm the score sheet with attributes, just hoping that by blanketing your form with answers that eventually you're going to hit where the experts had indicated a response. From a scoring standpoint, we're ready for you, and you're not going to get credit for having indicated too many responses in that sense. So.
Next, do we need to register for the conference to take the exam?
So if you're somebody who is interested in taking the exam next year, when you go to sign up, there's, it's always going to have to be in person for the taste test. We can't do this as a virtual one. So there's two different price levels. There's a price for if you are a member, and there's a price for if you are not a member. So you don't have to be a member, and you don't have to attend conference, but you will be there. And just if I can personal plug in, going to the ACS conference was and continues to be one of the great joys of my career. It's a lot of fun, and it's one of the few opportunities that you have in your professional life to really learn across a broad spectrum of different professional domains. You have cheesemakers there, you have academicians, you have supply chain experts, you have retailers and food service folks, all presenting on really, really interesting and relevant topics. So incredibly fun, incredibly great opportunity to learn. If you can't stick around for conference, no, it's not it's not critical. If you can, please do.
I'm going to keep going. So, clarifying question here. To reiterate, unlike the CCP exam, we will not be identifying attributes of flawed cheese.
Not intentionally flawed cheese, but the cheese could end up having flaws.
I mean, yeah, it's like
And then
Andy
the
said,
attributes could be, yeah.
it's right. It's cheese from the supply chain, which is not always perfect. And so we don't try, we don't have an ability to pick stuff out for its perfection or for its flaws. We're just pulling in cheese from the supply chain. And so whether it has any flaws or not, to us is irrelevant. And to you, it should be irrelevant too, because your job simply is to characterize what you perceive to be present about the cheese.
One concern, if we are studying on our own, how do we know where the intensity threshold is? It's a question.
It's tough, isn't it? I mean, it's you just have to do your best. It is why we encourage you to find at least one other person to help you figure out, where your thresholds or your, kind of outlying biases are. How else are you going to do it? So it's really useful if you can find a buddy. And I think Andy mentioned this already too. You can email the ACS and say, I'm really interested in finding a study buddy to prepare with, and they can, just sort of put that out there for people who are interested in working together. They can connect you to other people who are preparing for the test, and then, you've got a buddy at that point.
I have in addition to that,
to be buddies.
when Andy and I, when we were going through studying to kind of get the intensity, we would try over the course of weeks the same style of cheese, but a different cheese of the same style to kind of have that comparison to gauge the intensity.
Great point, Ollie.
Are we sampling US made cheeses, or should we expect to see other regions outside of the US in our assessment? Yes, I know that one.
Yeah, so that was a point
Yeah.
that was
Yes.
raised in the presentation because, when you go to find product in the marketplace, a certain portion of it is internationally produced, and we're just pulling stuff in from kind of the supply chain broadly. Yeah, you can certainly expect to see cheeses that are internationally produced and also U.S. produced on the exam. However, you're not going to know that that's true. It's just a cheese that's identified by a category and a subcategory. And so whether it's made here or elsewhere is kind of besides the point.
I'll make a question that I think hasn't been covered. I'll ask it. Should I pay attention to my perfumes and soaps on the day of the exam?
What a great question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We definitely request no perfume on the day, and we eat through some extra steps and the soaps and the bath by the test room. We have aroma-free soaps. We do have hand cleaning wipes that are also going to be aroma-free because part of the evaluation is going to be actually moving the cheese with your finger and thumb, kind of feeling out the texture on it. And so everything that we're doing is to make sure that we're not introducing any additional aromas outside of the cheeses. So yes, Oliver, I'm going to have to ask you to not wear your Chanel number 5 to test.
Yeah, I'll behave. Promise.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you.
Other questions? We do provide.
Any
If
last
anybody
minute
doesn't have the
questions?
Chapsy Johnson is, yeah.
I was going to add that during the test, we do provide palate cleansers, if that was somebody's
Yes.
question. So there's a range of stuff in there, from water to cracker to bread to fruits to tea. We basically ask the ACS Judging and Competition Committee, hey, what do you put out to for the judges as palate cleansers? And we just basically bring into the room that broad assortment. Whatever they recommend for their judges, that's what we bring in for you. I guess no more questions, huh?
I was going to say 10 seconds of silence.
Yeah.
No other questions. Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you for coming.
Again, if you have any questions outside of this webinar, please reach out. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. No, Tracy, no categories are ignored.
Mhm.
All 17 are possible. We look forward to seeing everybody in Sacramento, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was
This is the
awesome.
fun one.
Thank you so much, guys, for this. Very informative.
Thanks, Kira.
No
Thank you,
problem.
Kira.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.
All right. Take care. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks.